Hello and welcome. My name is Bachand and welcome to Prince George Up Close, the only show in this community where we go into one-on-one extended conversations with this community's movers and shakers. Today I have City Councillor Murry Krause with me today. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good, good.
So I want to start off our conversation with, you've been on City Council for a very, very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with City Council and how things have changed over time?
Well, it has changed dramatically. I was thinking about that on the way over here, and I think that it used to be much more of a part-time role in the community. We're noticing that with the instantaneousness of communication and those kinds of things, it becomes pretty much a full-time job. And you're never off, and it really is about being accessible to the community and community members, and being ready for council meetings, and the list goes on. So it's changed dramatically.
When you started with City Council, what was the motivation that got you involved with City Council?
I had been a youth activist in the community, and I went before council many times talking about things I wanted to see happen in our community, especially as it related to social and health services. And very often in those days, it was that it's not the responsibility of local government, it's a provincial or federal responsibility. And my response was, well, I think it should be, because this is the level of government closest to the people. And so that was my motivation, was to be on council, get on council, and make sure that voice was represented. And so I ran once, wasn't successful, ran again in 1996 and was successful. And here I am.
You had a bit of a break in between your City Council sessions.
I did.
And so what made you want to go back to City Council after your first terms?
That's a good thing to call it a break.
Get a little bit of a rest.
Yeah. Forced rest. I said the night of the election that I would be back. I wasn't done.
Yeah.
I really felt that that I had lots more left in me, and that I wanted to continue, and so that gave me a three-year break.
Okay.
And ran again, and was re-elected, and so in 2002, and so I've been on ever since. And so I think hopefully the community felt I was doing something worthwhile for them, and that they saw fit to re-elect me in 2002.
When this City Council, your term is a little bit longer now. It's 4 years instead of 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you can do a lot more with that extra year, and you're able to push more initiatives with that extra year?
Well, I've never viewed my role on council as defined by the term. I've always tried to think in terms of the longer term, and I think that we have to think in the longer term. I've said to many people who are elected officials around the province, great cities or great communities weren't created in 3 and 4 year increments. It's longer term thinking that's going to get our community closer to what the community would like to see for us.
So for this term in particular, how are things going? Are you finding that this term has been a lot more productive, a lot less productive? What's your feelings of City Council this time?
It's a great term. I think we have, Marilyn Hall is a good leader, very inclusive and really progressive. And certainly I'm feeling really comfortable with my colleagues, and it is a good team. And that makes a lot of difference. And we have a great team on administration, and the city staff have been doing great work for a long time. So it really is about championing what they do, and thanking them for what they do, and appreciating them for their efforts.
And I guess you could say that because of the people, the council is really made up by the people, but you said it a little earlier that this council is a lot more progressive, and it is very much a socially minded, progressive council.
That's right.
And you've taken on initiatives like the Rainbow Sidewalk most recently, the renaming from Fort George Park to Clayton Memorial Park.
That's right.
What has been, is it just the people that's been on City Council that's motivated that change, or what is the change? And
well, it's changing times too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about, I want Prince George to be seen as a progressive community, where that we're on side with what's happening across the nation. And again, because I think that it's important to acknowledge that we're in competition with the rest of the nation for a whole bunch of things. And so we want people to want to relocate here. We want people who live here to feel like it's a good place to live. And it's about some of those things that will help do that. Because again, we have to be committed to diversity. It is a changing world. And so it's about being diverse and being current. So I think we're incumbent on us to be all of those things. At the same time, hopefully providing stable government and doing all the things that local government needs to do, especially cities, around our infrastructure and keeping taxes as low as possible and all those kinds of things.
How do you personally try to hear minority voices in the community with like LGBTQ community or visible minority groups? How do you try to connect with those groups?
Well, see, being accessible. I think I said it. It's always that people feel free that they can contact you, and of course, as I said earlier, with the new opportunities around communication, is that they're accessible almost 24 hours a day. So my phone number's in the phone book, and emails are readily accessible from the 5th floor at City Hall, and all those things. So it really is. It can be very immediate, and especially once you've been on council for a while too, as people get to know you and know that you're approachable, and they feel free to do so.
One of the areas I want to talk about is the Select Committee on Homelessness.
Great.
You chair that committee. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys have been doing and what your mandate is?
Yeah, it's great, and it's actually, again, along with what I just said, it's evolved. I think the committee first started out as the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay.
We had conversations, and we already knew there was a group in the community that were doing stuff around homelessness. We thought, why would we replicate their work and duplicate their work? And so we said, let's carve that off and make sure that Community Partners Addressing Homelessness carries on with that, and we'll support it. And then we started looking at the issues around affordable housing and saying one of the ways to prevent homelessness is to make sure we have some affordable housing options in our community. So started working very closely with administration, with what's happening in other communities and how they've encouraged developers to develop affordable housing, and really looking at what the City of Prince George can do as well, not waiting for the province or the feds to make it happen, but what can we do on our own here. What's happened is that at the Mayor's request, we're starting to look at that morphing into a larger overview of social planning in the community. So with the rehire of Chris Bone to be our social planning facilitator, and looking at what's currently happening across Canada in social planning within local government, we're starting to implement that plan.
And so what are some of the initiatives that go on with that? Like, is it kind of, do you guys just go in with funding and fund with SEPA and fund that program itself and give them more opportunities? Or do you build housing opportunities for them or do that sort of stuff?
I think the role of the City of Prince George is to be a facilitator. There's no way that the City of Prince George can take on all of the things that need to happen in our community. I think it's really important to acknowledge, and sometimes people get tired of hearing this, but local governments only get about 8% of all the taxes you pay. So we have to be realistic about what local government can do, nor do we want to take everything on, because there's a whole bunch of really credible work happening in our community, and people are taking it on with passion and enthusiasm, so why would you take that away? So it really is about encouragement. It's one of the things we're finding with the new social planning model is about sharing information. So that people really know what's going on at the other tables in the community. Because I've been at enough tables in this community to find out sometimes that people are about to embark on exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So especially if people don't know other things are going on. So it's about making sure that information is shared so that people are being productive. And I know that from those tables in the community, they're excited by this new option of the city helping facilitate that, and so that indeed we're moving a whole bunch of these issues forward.
Now, on data terms, do you think homelessness in this community or at-risk homelessness is going down, or do you think it's going up?
Well, I think that we've acknowledged we have a bit of an issue in Prince George. We are the capital of the North, and we have, because of our population, we have many more services than other small communities in the region have. We've had lots of people have to migrate to Prince George to get services they need. So again, some of those are challenging things like mental health and addiction services and services for people with disabilities and those kinds of things. So it really is about acknowledging that we have to get out in front of the affordable housing issue. We have to get out in front of the homelessness issue, so indeed it doesn't get worse.
When we talk about homelessness. We also, I remember at City Council, there was a lot of conversations around the RCMP resources that go into 3rd and George, and there's a lot of social services in that area. How do we balance our want to help people and do things, but also our need to create a safe environment and community security?
My view on that is if we are a progressive community, do things right, it will be a safe community. So it's not about, I think, of course we want balance, but it's about doing it right. And so if we do things in a really progressive way, research has shown that if we did things the way that it should be done, it would be cheaper. So it really is about doing it right from the beginning. And so it's about being progressive, about acknowledging that people, many of the people on the street have mental health and addiction issues, and that we need to deal with those in an effective way. It's not about pushing them away. Other communities have tried to push issues out of their downtown, of course, only to have it rear its head in residential neighborhoods. So it really is, let's not do that. We already did that in Prince George around the issues around prostitution. So I think it really is, but that was years ago, and we warned people that would be the end result. And to this day, there's still neighborhoods that struggle with, having the issue of the sex trade happening in their neighborhood. So it really is about being progressive. Acknowledge. I think another thing is to acknowledge is we live in in 2016, and that this is what's happening around the world. And so not to somehow feel that this is only happening in Prince George. These are real urban issues that probably every community in Canada is facing. And so I think I want to hit it head on in a really progressive and caring way, as opposed to thinking that somehow we can deal with it with, as we said, more boots on the ground and more policing. That's not the answer.
And you can even say that Superintendent Warren Brown has echoed even those sort of sentiments as well by him saying that we need more social programs. Like Car 60. Car 60, how do you feel about Car 60?
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, it really is about to acknowledge from a whole bunch of perspectives, is that somebody being picked up who has mental health issues, it's much better, of course, to have a psychiatric nurse or somebody in the vehicle who can help that person if they need to get to the hospital. And once they get to the hospital, there's that immediate connection at the hospital with what needs to happen for that patient. And again, what it also does is frees up the constable or the officer to be able to go on to other work rather than having to sit and emerge with a patient. So it's a brilliant, and I think we just had a meeting last week with the superintendent where we're talking about how do you wrap services around somebody who's seen as a nuisance sort of offender. They're not dangerous, and they're just seen as nuisance offenders, drunken, on the street and they're drunk or under the influence, or they're in, those kinds of things, and they get thrown in jail, or they're just in breach of their probation. Why would we keep throwing them in jail?
The very visible
ones.
It's
very, and so it really is about, and a lot of them are very prolific. It happens constantly. And so if we know who they are, very often we know their names. So I mean, that makes a difference when you know people's names and you can acknowledge maybe what they've gone through in their life. And how do you help them get out of that cycle? And we know from experience of other communities, and we know even here, is that very often we need to get a roof over somebody's head so we can stabilize them in their life, stabilize them as a person, and so they can start dealing with the other issues that are going on in their life. So it really is back to it being a caring response to a long-standing, challenging issue.
And not just on the municipal level, but even on the federal level, we've been seeing quite a bit of echoing of the same sentiments, right? Especially by our Prime Minister. What is your impression of this new federal government, and how is there any ways that the City of Prince George can work with them and things like that?
Oh yeah, very much so. I think it's a new opportunity. I think we're seeing it. It's not only what's being said politically, but I think it's what's happening on the ground, and so that's important. And so I think we're starting to see a real opportunity, and again, all across Canada, I know from the experience we've had around, provincially, and federally, is this might be a new opportunity to talk about a national housing strategy. And also maybe a national anti-poverty strategy, because the federal government made commitments years ago to eliminate poverty in Canada, where if anything it's gotten worse. And it really is about how do we start being smarter about this. Again, I said earlier, research has shown if we did this right and had the courage to take the big step, it would be less expensive. So it really is about doing it right, getting roof over people's heads, making sure they have the services available to them that they need, and help them stabilize their lives.
So I want to go for a hypothetical here. I know politicians don't love doing hypotheticals, but now let's say you're prime minister and you can draft that national housing strategy for yourself and for the country. What would you want that national housing strategy to look like?
I think it would be presumptuous to think that somehow you knew on your own what that would look like. I think the only way to make that work would be consultation, a thorough consultation with the people most affected, local governments, to make sure that it's going to hit the mark for them. It's a process of consultation. So at the end of the day, you get it right, rather than thinking you can jump for quick solutions and all of a sudden it's going to be better. It really is about doing it right from the beginning. And I don't think any federal government or leader is going to have all the answers. So it really is about including and involving the people who are closest to the issue.
So with your work at the Central Interior Native Health Society, it has you working with a lot of at-risk people. What have things been happening there in that sort of organization that you've been working with?
Well, we're doing very well. I mean, we're a really team-based approach to provision of healthcare for our patients. We can have anywhere from 1,100 to 1,500 patients. Sometimes the most challenging patients in the community. We have lots of really stable patients as well. And to be a patient at Native Health, you're either Aboriginal or you're living on or close to the street. So about 80% of our patients are Aboriginal people, and about 20% are not. But really looking at trying to specialize in service for those individuals who probably have less opportunity and less resources than many other people would have. So it's really, again, trying to provide exemplary care that will hopefully turn things around for them. And again, acknowledging that many of the people come to us with many issues, have experienced incredible trauma in their lives, and it really is about acknowledging that. And it's not as simple putting a Band-Aid on and sending somebody away. It's a long-term relationship where you build some trust and help that person through the bumps.
And you've been working a lot with Indigenous groups in this area, the Claytley and the Carrier. How does City Council strengthen relationships or build on relationships that are already existing with the various Indigenous groups in the area?
Well, I think it's about building some trust. And it's about, I think one of the things I've said to other local governments in the province is, don't just go to First Nations when you want something. It really is about building a long-term relationship, and then you can have the conversations that need to happen. It's about putting your money where your mouth is. It's about doing things like, for some that would be unpopular, is doing things like renaming the park to acknowledge that was a Claytley village at one time. And a whole bunch of awful things happened around their relocation. And that has carried in for many elders, it's still in their living memory about what happened. And so it really is about a true sense of an apology and acknowledgement that we had an opportunity to do something significant here, and we did.
Do you see any more initiatives similar to the renaming of the park that the city would take on? And
that would be in a conversation with Chief Dominic Frederick and the council and the community. The renaming of the park didn't just happen overnight. It was a long-term conversation with the Claytley people about what had happened on that piece of property, and what had happened, and how over time, in advance of our 100th anniversary, we had conversations with them about what would be significant. And for the chief, it was about renaming the park. And memorial was important to him in the renaming of it because there is a burial ground there. There's actually other mass burial sites on that property because of epidemics that went through the area. So it really is more than just that little piece of land that we see as a current and active grave site, or cemetery. There's other sites in the park that are mass burial sites. So it was really important to acknowledge that there's a long-term history there, and that it had to mean something.
And one of the things that has just been announced with the provincial government has been the initiative with public transit from Prince Rupert and Prince George, and trying to combat the problem with the Highway of Tears and missing and murdered Aboriginal women. Does the city get involved in that sort of fight, I guess, that sort of that dealing with that issue?
We've certainly been an advocate for something needing to be done along the Highway of Tears. Prince George, we've been approached. Local governments will be making financial contributions to that transportation system, or whatever you want to call it. And certainly Prince George will be paying what we see as our share, because it's being shared across the line. And we certainly are, we haven't been at the table, but certainly one of the conversations will be that Prince George probably should be at the table. And we had a conversation, and the mayor will be making those inquiries.
Okay. And now I want to talk about your position on the Union of BC Municipalities. You're now the president, right?
I'm the first vice president.
First vice president.
So September, if politics being politics and everything goes well, I'll be the president in September.
Okay. So what has your role been in that organization? For people who don't really know what the Union of BC Municipalities are, that's my trick word there. What is that?
It's a membership organization. So all of the local governments in British Columbia, regional districts and cities and towns, and now self-governing First Nations are members of the Union of BC Municipalities. And so it really is coming together to share issues, to look at ways to lobby the provincial government and sometimes the federation and the federal government. And so it really is about that collective voice to the province. We also, of course, not of course, but we do share best practices, what's happening, some problem solving that is taken place in some other communities. Why not share that?
Exactly.
And so, the conference in September will also be about, it'll be workshops, and it'll be the annual general meeting, it'll be election of officers, it'll be a lot of things, and the provincial government will be represented, and there'll be opportunities to meet with ministers and all those kinds of things. So it's a very active and intense week. And so it really is a coming together of local governments to really share best practices, like I said, and push the common agenda forward.
Okay. So then where do you see Prince George? Obviously Prince George benefits in all those areas that you say from, but is there an area where Prince George can, so if we're concerned, they're able to move forward and maybe get some foots forward in the next couple of years where they might see some growth? Or
well, I think that the policies that UBCM has accepted are those resolutions which have passed on the floor of the convention. So that sets policy. It's not just the board deciding what's the policy for the year. It's whatever passes on the floor of the convention that becomes the policy for that year. And if it's passed on the floor of the convention, it never goes away. It's a constant reminder when we're meeting with the individual ministers or we're meeting with the government. It's about, these are things that we still have on our books that we're concerned about, local governments are concerned about, and we want to have conversations about it. And of course we want some resolution. So it really is about continuing to be really strong, solid advocates for those issues. And so that's the work. And so we have, of course, the whole province is represented on the board. It's a fairly large board. I got on the executive of the UBCM by being the president of the North Central Local Government Association. That was my entry to there, and then ran as a director at large, served as director at large for several years, and then moved up from third, second, first vice president.
And what has been some of your motivations? Like, what has been some of the organization, the Union of BC Municipalities, has its goals. What has made you want to push forward with that?
Well, again, I think that many of the things that are important to Prince George are, of course, goals of the UBCM. It's sort of something on the word, and have been the goals of UBCM, and also. The UBCM is a very progressive organization, and the local governments want to make sure that the citizens of British Columbia are well taken care of. And so there's been resolutions on the floor around anti-poverty, around housing, around all of those things. So it's multifaceted. It's about what we see as our basic role as a councillor and what we do every day around infrastructure and all of those things. But it's also, to top it off nicely, with a social justice mandate that looks at the health and well-being of the citizens of British Columbia.
So, grabbing our crystal ball here and looking into the future, what do you see for the future of Prince George, and where do you see us going in the next maybe 5 years or even 10 years?
I mean, I think that's challenging. I've been around long enough to know that it's
Hard to
often, yeah, it's hard to see into the future, and that it's very often things happen, right people, right time, and all those kinds of things. So it's the opportunities arise, and if the right people are in place and those kinds of things, that's when you get traction. So it really is. But again, it's about council, and about our leaders, other leaders in the community, and about the whole community being tireless in making sure our community moves forward. And I think one of the biggest issues I have sometimes with Prince George is our own self-deprecation. And I think we really have to work hard at not falling into the trap of when somebody says, oh, Prince George, that we don't fall into the trap of emitting the same emotion. So it really is about being solid, being strong about Prince George is a good place to live. We have lots of opportunity here, and we have lots to be proud about. So again, stop the self-deprecation and get on with being proud of who we are, and we will move this community forward.
Hell yeah, Prince George, basically.
All the right ways.
And things like that, organizations like that push forward.
That's right.
Do you think Prince George pride is improving?
I do. I think that as we've seen the community move forward, I mean, you look at where our position with the healthcare in the north, the role that we play in that. We look at the post-secondary education with the university and the college. And all of those things, I think people were building that, hey, we're okay. And then also hearing from I think one of the things too is hearing from people who have newly moved to our community or are looking at moving to Prince George and saying, this is a brilliant place to live. And it's affordable, and it's all those things, and it's small enough that my family will fit in and be part of a larger community. And I think, again, maybe it's overworked, but I think the Canada Winter Games was a game changer for Prince George in acknowledging what we really can accomplish. So I think that was a good turning point for us. And I think also for First Nations, it was the Claytley being the first host nation of any. The first time ever for a Canada Games event. So I think it was all those things. Again, showed how progressive we were, how we can work together to make the good things happen. And so I think we're on the right track. And now we have to look at what's happening. Of course, and it's not an excuse. There's so many external factors that we also have to be cognizant of and know how to address them effectively.
Okay. And I guess my final question would be what do you hope for yourself for the future? Where do you see everything going for yourself personally?
Well, I'm going to retire here, and so I want it to be a good place to be an old person at too. So it really is about I want it to be healthy for all of our citizens. I want children to thrive, and I want young people to thrive, and I want it to be a good, healthy place in which to retire and watch people around me flourish. So it really is about being all of those things, and I think that means that people need good housing, they need good jobs, they need good access to health care, and they need to be able to afford to participate in the community. And we want to see the elimination of things like poverty and homelessness and people having to live on the street and all those things. So it's that big basket of just a really good, healthy community.
Excellent. Murray, thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
A big thank you to Murry Krause. That's our show. Tell us who you want to see on the show next by tweeting me at Bachand. Till next time, thanks for watching.